On November 29th, 1972, the most famous arcade game of all time was released to the public, Pong. Pong was built by Alan Alcorn, or more known as Al Alcorn, under the supervision of Nolan Bushnell. Nolan Bushnell and Ted Dabney met Al Alcorn while working at Ampex and both hired Al as Atari's first design engineer. In the late summer of 1972, Bushnell and Alcorn built a prototype and installed it at a local bar, owned by Bill Gaddis. In an exclusive interview in Atari 50, a digital museum game developed by Digital Eclipse, Alcorn explains that Pong's prototype had accumulated so many coins in his collection system, the game ran into technical issues. From late 1972 to early 1973, there was a rift developing in the business relationship between Bushnell and Dabney. Dabney saying that Bushnell was pushing him off to the side, and Bushnell seeing Dabney as a roadblock for his visions for Atari. Dabney left the company in March of 1973 and left the video game industry, but helped build on Bushnell's other business ventures, such as Bushnell's Pizza Time Theater, which would later become Chuck E. Cheese's. In 1973, Bushnell began to expand the operations of the Atari company, even moving its corporate headquarters to Los Gatos, California, and in 1973, Atari acquired Cyan Engineering, which was a computer engineering firm founded by Steve Mayer and Larry Emmons. In September of that same year, Atari founded the competitor in secret called Gee Games, which was led by Bushnell's neighbor, Joe Keenan. This was to circumvent pinball distributors' preferences for exclusive distributed deals. While early on, games from Key Games were near copies of Atari's own games, they later on started to develop their own titles that started to draw deals towards Key Games. Despite their early successes, Bushnell started noticing that Atari was starting to become financially unstable, and he was eventually forced to lay off half of Atari's staff. Atari was also facing intense competition within the arcade space from other companies, many of which made clones of popular games such as Pong. This was exacerbated from an accounting mistake when Atari released Grand Track 10, so Atari tried to create a Japanese branch of the company to exclusively sell their games in the Japanese arcade market. But eventually the operation faced multiple legal issues. In an interview in 2018, Al Alcorn considered it an utter disaster beyond recognition, and Bushnell sold Atari's Japanese branch to Namco, which had an exclusive distribution of Atari's games in the Japanese market for $500,000. Later on in 1974, Key Games merged with Atari, and in the merger, Keenan was kept as president and Bushnell still as CEO of Atari. In November of 1974, Atari's newest game, Tank, was a success in the arcade market and helped re-establish Atari's financial stability. And in beginning in 1975, Atari started to pursue new product ideas. One of these ideas was a home version of Pong, and design of the console began in late 1974 with Al Alcorn collaborating with Harold Lee and Bob Brown. Originally, Atari struggled to find a distributor for the console, but eventually signed a deal with Sears to make around 150,000 units of the home console of Pong by the end of the 1975 holiday season. The home console, branded as Sears Telegame, was actually in high demand during the holiday season and helped Atari establish a home division in the wakes of its success. In 1975, Bushnell drove an effort to develop a home console that would play the games that Atari had made during that time, and under the engineers of Joe Decor and Jay Miner, developed codenamed Stella, which came to be the Atari VCS console. In 1976, Bushnell considered the idea of Atari going public, but then tried selling the company to MCA and Disney, but they passed on Bushnell's offers. After 6 months of looking for a buyer, Warner Brothers Communications took an acquisition offer from Atari and started to negotiate a purchase. Atari was also known at this period of time for its lax employee policies and work culture inside of the company. This went as far as meetings, where they even had meetings in such places as Bushnell's home, as more informal-esque gatherings within the company. In November 1976, the acquisition offer from Warner for $28 million, and Warner provided around $120 million in funding for the development of codename Stella, which Atari completed in February of the next year. Manny Gerard, who oversaw Atari, brought in Ray Kassar, who was previously vice president of Burling Industries. Kassar helped to develop marketing strategies for the company and started a new campaign called "Don't Watch TV Tonight, Play It." Later on, Atari continued developing home consoles through 1977, but later on destroyed their unsold stock in 1978. And as they approached the end of the year, they produced 800,000 units for the VCS, but failed to make any progress during the selling period. Completed it by early 1977 and was released to the market in September of the same year. Most launch titles for the console were based on Atari's earlier arcade games, such as Combat, that incorporated mechanics and aspects of tank and Jetfire. Atari made around 400,000 consoles for the holiday season, which eventually sold, but the company lost money due to production problems and late delivery for retailers reselling the VCS. Kassar's influence on Atari grew throughout 1978, leading to a rift in relations between Bushnell and Warner Brothers. This led him to leave the company that same year, where Ray Kassar became CEO and chairman of Atari.